point. Languages always go, when languages are invented or developed or whatever they are, all right, what do you think they go from? Do they start concrete or do they start euphemistic? See, we even have a split here. Okay, well, let's go this way. If you have a people that are non-literate, now I've studied a lot of non-literate stuff because it's really important to understand it from an ancient literature standpoint. If you understand how non-literate people are, that is cavemen, okay, people that have no literacy, then you can understand what happens in literacy, with literacy and with you know, that's what I like to do is I teach about you know, mostly Greek, ancient Greek stuff, but it applies for ancient Hebrew too. So let's say I have a tribe. Let's say I have a tribe of people that are non-literate. They're living out in the Paiute Guinea or whatever. What do you expect their language to be? Concrete or euphemistic?
Concrete.
We find their languages are incredibly concrete. For example, when I say the word love, what do you picture in your mind?
All kinds of stuff.
Don't lie. No, you don't. What do you, there's only one thing I know that you picture in your mind. You picture the word love. Because, why do you do that? What's that? Because you're literate. That's right. When I say the word love, here's a better one. If I say the word chair, what do you picture? No, you don't. What do you picture when I say the word chair?
Something with 4 legs and a back.
No, you don't.
The word chair.
You picture the word chair. If you don't picture the word chair, you aren't literate, guys. Well, maybe that's a picture of education or whatever. No, you know, if I say the word chair, I'll give you a little bit that you might, well, I don't know, which chair do you pick?
That explains why I can't spell.
What do you pick? Look, here's a chair. Did anybody picture this? Then your chair is a bad chair. The only way that you can picture something that incorporates all the chairs in English is by doing what? Thinking the word. Now, I'm worried about you guys if you were picturing a chair, because you know why? One of the ways you can tell a pre-literate culture is, what do they imagine? Pictures, not words. When I say the word bear, and they did this study, this is my favorite study, okay, Papua Guinea or whatever, to the people that were Stone Age, they went and studied their language. And they asked them, bear, they have a word for bear in their language. And when they said the word bear, their answer was, yes, the bear that my uncle saw that went into his tent or hut, you know, 50 years ago. Why? They had no written word for bear, so their only antecedent to bear was what? That bear that somebody actually saw with their own eyes. See? Now, if I asked those people to say, if I said the word love to them, what can they not do? So can you have a word if you can't picture it?
You can picture the manifestations of it, but you can't picture it.
So can you have a word for love? No. It is impossible to have a word like love in a pre-literate culture. Yes, sir.
What about actions? Because early tribal peoples would have had to have a word for go.
Yep.
Or come, or, you know, in other words, something that is not necessarily an object.
Yes. That's verbs. Yeah. But you can picture it. If I say the word go, you know, of course, the minute I say the word go, I hope you think G-O. Otherwise, I'm worried. Because that is a verb and does not have an antecedent that is a noun, you know, an actual physical thing. But what do I picture? If I then put my brain in gear and I say, I picture go, what do I picture? A car, movement, person, right? I picture go. I can picture go. You can see it in your, Dick and Jane books, right? So the trick is this, that yes, early cultures developed what? They developed nouns, and they've developed verbs. But until you actually develop what? You're going to have a real difficult problem with euphemistic, or how about emotions? I mean, you can say cry. That's an easy word, right? Cry. Or sad. Picture those. But those are advanced thoughts, right? But for really advanced thoughts, like love, you pretty much have to wait until you have literacy. Once you get literacy, remember that thing I showed you? How religion evolves? You can't ever forget this. You start with animism, and you move to 2, which is pantheonic paganism, and then 3 is mysterion, and then 4 is Gnosticism. So, what's the big divider between animism and paganism? Literacy. And what's the big drive between pagan and Mysterian? Philosophy. And then the big draw between Mysterion and Gnosticism is really science. The advent of science. So, we just answered our question. Were the Psalms written down or were they oral? You're not listening.
Oh, you just missed the whole point.
You missed the whole
Start back
point.
over again.
All right. All right. Well, I'll give you more. Remember, I told you, Greek is very concrete. What do you think I'm going to tell you about Hebrew? I've told you about Hebrew like this for all the time.
Very euphemistic.
Hebrew is extremely euphemistic. Matter of fact, it is so euphemistic, it is more euphemistic than English. It's probably as euphemistic as Japanese. Japanese is incredibly euphemistic. What does that mean? That means that there are very, very complex words in it. There are words that are like love, that, by the way, let me tell you how complex it is in Japanese. Japanese, like Hebrew, is a very limited language with very few words. It shares words. So love in Japanese, like is ski, love is daisuki. And guess what? The words ski and daisuki also are names of fish. It is such a euphemistic language that it only has really one word for love and like that have to be used euphemistically within context. And the same word can mean something you're eating for dinner. That is incredibly euphemistic. Now in Hebrew, there are basically 4 words for love. 4 words for love. 2 of them are Hebraic. One of them is very specific to God. One is very specific to man. 2 of the words are borrowed words. Both of them are pornographic. So the big deal here is, all right, remember I told you, when you start with you told me, when you start with a language, the language starts what? Concrete or euphemistic? Concrete. And it grows to euphemism. Matter of fact, what would you expect Anglo-Saxon to be? Concrete or euphemistic?
More euphemistic, or more concrete though.
It is very concrete. Anglo-Saxon is a very concrete language. a very concrete language. But English is very euphemistic. Greek is a very concrete language. Why do you think Greek remained concrete? I mean, this is kind of a segue, but why do you think Greek remained concrete? What was the characteristic about Greek that made it stay very concrete?
Under a scientific background?
Well, it's geometrically based. The language itself is geometrically based. So you see it as a language. And for example, we're not going to see very many cases, like in Greek. We saw where the Greeks take a word and they take the suffix and the prefix and they make new words, right? You're not going to see that in Hebrew. You're going to see, what do you think they do to change the words? In Greek, I build words like building blocks. In English, I kind of do that too, right? But in Hebrew, what do you think I do to change the meaning? The context. The context of the word. The context of the metaphor. The context, that's the way in Japanese, when I tell you I like you and I'm not giving you a fish for dinner, that's the difference, is the context of the words. However, the thing that's most critical to note is this. Euphemism in a language means the language has been around for a long time. Euphemism in a language also assumes something else. What is it? It's written. Does somebody else have something else to say?
Literacy.
It's written down. There is literacy. Because you can't be euphemistic if you don't, look, can you see in Japanese thought, if you start with a word that means fish and you end up with a word that means love, what has happened between the fish and the love?
A lot of words.
Got cooked.
Yeah.
Literacy. Literacy. Because what did I do? I chose a word that I can use euphemistically within the pantheon of words I have. And if I have a very limited language, what do I choose? I got to reuse words, right? So I put it within a context. But to develop love as a context, what do I have to have? Pretty much literacy, right? I have to be beginning to move into very strong euphemism or literacy. So the point is this. I have Hebrew that is a very strong euphemistic language that assumes what has happened for a long time. It's been written down. Now, to make it very easy, I don't think that any Hebrew was written down prior to the time that they went to Egypt. What did they get in Egypt? Hieroglyphics, literacy. As a matter of fact, you got two choices in where you're going to find proto-languages. Where are your two choices, guys? Anybody ever studied the development language? I think I've taught a class before, but you may not have been in my class when I did. There's two places where proto-languages were discovered in the Western world. Proto-languages, one of them is Egypt, and that developed into hieroglyphics. The other one is Sumerian. Yeah, the Sumerian era where they had proto-language, and that language developed into cuneiform. Cuneiform forms. Okay? Simplistically, who won out? No. Hieroglyphics. Almost all of the Greek letters are based in hieroglyphics. A little bit of cuneiform, you see some influence, but almost all the Greek letters. You guys remember your World Book encyclopedia? They showed you every, didn't you read that when you were a kid? Might even be able to pull off the thing here and see it. But remember the front of your World Book encyclopedia, when it said A, what did it go through? It went through the development of the alphabet, of that letter. And almost all the letters started with what? Hieroglyphics. Because the hieroglyphics were the beginning of almost all Western language. We had cuneiform forms that came about. However, one thing about Hebrew. Hebrew is a what as a written language? I should have brought pictures. I didn't bring any pictures. But you can guess. If I have a hieroglyphic form, hieroglyphic forms, let's see, what's a good I don't know, don't have one in my brain. How about hieroglyphic form? That's just simply a cartouche where you put a hieroglyphic in it. But in a hieroglyphic form, anybody remember you have basically three types of hieroglyphic form. Hieroglyphic form, number one is what? Written on stone, chiseled into stone. I have two other forms. I have hieratic and what's the other one? Hieratic and, anyway, both hieratic and the other one are what?
Some kind of vellum or papyrus.
They're written, yes, they're written on papyrus, and they're written with brushes. They're written with brushes. You guys hear this? This is very important. In hieroglyphics, I write hieroglyphic in stone. I basically have to do what? Chisel it into stone. So the hieroglyphics are designed in hieroglyphics to be chiseled into stone. But I have hieratic script and what's the other one?
This was the clay tablet. When did that?
That I'm going to get to that. But in a hieratic form, the hieratic forms are written with a brush.
So you get rounder, more sweeping.
Well, they're simplified hieroglyphics that you can write with a brush. And so the priests would write the hieroglyphics with a brush, the hieratic script. Now, what did the Samaritans, how did they write? Cuneiform is written in clay, right? And it looks like this. Like this is a clay form type thing, right? Cuneiform clay. And I write it into wet clay. Do I cut it into stone? No. I write it in wet clay. Now, if I want to take this form and write it on, for example, papyrus or something else, well, let's put it this way. Why did the Sumerian group, why did the Syriac, I think it's Syriac group is a specific name, why did they use clay?
It's easier.
It was available.
Because it's available. They didn't have papyrus, right? They didn't. Vellum wasn't in their papyrus, and so what do you see as a form? What does Hebraic writing look like? I should have brought some
More
pictures.
rounded.
I got her. What's that?
More rounded.
Well, Hebraic script looks like cuneiform type stuff done with a brush. So where do you think Moses got his literacy? What do you think he was writing? Hieroglyphics on stone, and when he wrote on papyrus, which he didn't have for very long, right, because he moved out of Egypt, then he had to write it on clay. But hieroglyphics ain't going to work very good on clay. So what do you think old Moses and the buddies did?
They switched.
Well, they didn't have vellum at the time. Vellum's a late invention. So what they had to start with was cuneiform. And so, you know, they went to the Syriac area, right? And so they were writing on clay. And probably much later then began to write with brush script. But if you'll notice, and I have Hebraic stuff right here, it looks very cuneiformic. Later developed to the brush. The whole point in this is what? How long were the Hebrews literate? For a very long time. And the evidence is what? Number one, very strong euphemism. Number two, they're using words that are not the normal words you'd find in a very super concrete Stone Age type culture. And number three, they had the ability. For example, what do you think, you know, when it says that Moses brought down the whole Torah, so what do you think the whole Torah looked like? Probably hieroglyphics. It's on stone, right? Right?
I thought God wrote it.
I was thinking he was out there carving.
Well, the first time God wrote it, and the second time he had to write it. That was his punishment, I guess. Yeah.
Isn't this little, you say hieroglyphics are the most complicated of them, the ones chiseled in stone with the
Yeah.
brushwork. Isn't that reverse? Wouldn't it be, would you want it to be easier? I mean, it'd take much more work than using a brush.
The thing is,
Flipped. It seems like hieroglyphics ought to be easier than something that you would brush with.
You evolve to something easier.
there.
Well, I would think you would go from something easier to something more complicated.
No, what you did is this. When you first started, because the hieroglyphics represented like, looked like pictorial, basically the sounds that they made, the beginning sounds that they made, they looked like them. So when you first start, whether you're writing on, stone or you're writing, with chalk or you're writing however you're writing, the first thing you do is you make them your hieroglyphics are what? Complex, right? And then when you make them in stone, you want them to look pretty, so they're complex. What does then, it's just like going from our capitals that we teach our kids to begin with to script. Script looks beautiful, but it's a lot easier to write, right? Once you learn it. And so the serratic script that is the hieroglyphic type script, hieratic and serratic, basically those scripts look, they're very simple to write compared to a hieroglyphic where you got to draw every little piece. But when you're doing it in stone, what do you want? And plus you don't care, you're paying slaves, or you're not paying slaves. So, in any case, the whole point I'm trying to get to here is to answer Steve's question, the preponderance, we could probably guess that the preponderance of these documents were what? They're written, probably from their original form. As a matter, we'll talk about that in even more detail because, a lot of times, you're going to ask questions like, for example, well, could David write? Probably not. Could these guys write? Maybe not. And then you say, well, how did they then get them? Were they oral for a period and maybe written down? Or is anything else coming into play? Well, we're going to get to that because this isn't a bumper sticker course, right? We've got to build into it. So let's look at the first Psalm. Let's look at Psalm 1 and let's see what we can get out of it. And you know what? I missed one of the most important things that we've got to do, but I'm going to give you a very quick one to begin with. The form of all Psalms, if you remember, we've talked about literature and we've talked about the forms of literature and forms of writing. And so this is incredibly applicable. Remember in English, we do intro. Okay, in Greek, logos to telos. Okay, in Hebrew, synopsis body. So we should expect the Psalms to be, okay? Now, we're going to talk a lot about this form, but all Psalms are written to some degree. All poetry, I wish I had more time in this. We're going to have to take more time. But just to get there, I've got to tell you this right straight out. Okay, in English, how does our form of poetry work? Usually rhyme. Rhyming structure in English is the form, so it's rhythmic. Okay? In French poetry, how is it? Rhythmic with rhymes. In Anglo-Saxon poetry, how is it? It's beat meter. In Greek poetry, what is it? It's beat meter. Iambic pentameter, beat meter, it doesn't rhyme. Okay? Ancient poetry generally doesn't rhyme. Now, you tell me. Does Hebrew poetry rhyme? No. Hebrew poetry does not rhyme. What is its rhythmic structure?
A beat.
Nope. It doesn't have a beat structure either. Nope. Hebrew poetry has I don't know if you call it a mental structure. It is always based in parallelism. Ancient Hebrew poetry is always based in parallelism. In other words, what it does is there's a first statement. The second statement is either restated exactly as a reinforcement, or it's an antithetical. It's opposite. Very rarely opposite, but there is opposites. There's also different structures. We'll talk about those different structures. So whenever you read a psalm, what are you first looking for? You're going to look for synopsis body, but then what are you going to expect to see? Parallelism structure. So the first statement, and there's going to be two, the first two statements in the psalm are going to probably be what? The synopsis, and they're going to be parallel synopsis. Now, the fact that they're parallel statements does not mean they say the same thing. Why would you have a parallel structure? What are you trying to do if you are euphemistic language?
Make sure they know the content.
Reinforcement.
Reinforcement through what? If you're euphemistic, what are you reinforcing?
Repetition.
The concept.
The concept through what? How about metaphor? Okay, that's the word I'm looking for. Because what you're trying to do, if you are euphemistic language, almost everything you're writing is going to be based in metaphor. And so what you want your readers to not miss is what? Your metaphorical construction. Because if you mess up the metaphorical construction, what have you just done? You won't understand what's going on. So let's look at the first one. And what I did is I gave it to you. And I gave it to you with the translation. Blessed, esher. That means straight in happiness. Now, literally, man, isha is a woman. So a frail being is a man. Literally, ish means frail. Isha is an offspring, is basically feminine of that. Who does not, and lo is an absolute negation, does not halak. Remember, if you remember the Ruth class, we had halak and yak. Halak is to walk empty-handed. Yalak is to walk with something in your hands. And I don't have time to get into detail on that. We'll have to talk about later. The counsel of the Rasha. And it's not wicked. The Rasha are those who disturb. Why in a culture are those who disturb a problem?
They upset the peace.
They upset the peace. So the Rasha is the person that speaks out of turn. The Rasha is the person that's in the council that may say something that disturbs other people. So we have translated this wicked, but the Rasha literally means in Hebrew those who disturb. Or stand, that is stand in the way, derek. Now, derek means road in Hebrew, but what the point is here that you need to really wrap into your mind. In the view of the Hebrew, in a Hebrew mindset for culture, the road of your life, okay, I'm being very metaphorical because they are too. The road of your life is your derek. This is just like the way, which is also called Tin Hodos. You ever wonder why the early Christian Jews, the Jews called themselves Tin Hodos? It's because almost every psalm is going to hit you in between the eyes with this concept of the way. And you notice the very beginning, Esher, straight in happiness. What is straight in happiness?
Following the way.
The way, yeah. Following the straight way, okay? In the way, okay, or stand in the way, and this is really interesting, because the question here, do they mean metaphorically to stand in the way, as in get in the way of sinners? And it's not sinners, it's shata. Shata are those who are already guilty. They're already guilty, why? We'll find out later, but the law is already given, but I don't have time to get into details. Are those who sit. And, okay, there's no furniture, guys. So when it says they sit, it means they're sitting on the ground. And literally the word is mockers at the end. Luits, those who make mouths at. Do you see that? Okay, we never saw this in Greek, did we? Literally in Hebrew, a mocker is somebody who's doing this. Making mouths at someone. That's the word. You never saw that in Greek, did you? In Hebrew, these are very euphemistic metaphorical constructions together. So, in this beginning, blessed is the man that is blessed, straight in happiness, who does not walk empty-handed in the counsel, the advice of those who disturb, or stand in the way that direct the road of the sinners, the shata, those who are already guilty, or sit in the seat, the place of, and make mouths at others. So what's going to be the focus of this whole psalm?
Those that are following after blessing.
Those who are straight in the way. The whole psalm is going to be about that. In fact, the next one should be a parallel. Let's see what the second one is. I'm going to run out of time here, but the second one. But his delight, literally his pleasure, his chafetz, is in the law. The Torah. It says Torah. Now, this really irritates me. Why do we translate law as law and not Torah? Because we know what the Torah is, right? But his delight is in the Torah. And literally the Torah, and I misspelled it, should be the fly of an arrow. The Torah is a word that means that which is aimed at, or the fly of the arrow. Do you notice comparison between some Greek words that we had before? You know, a parabola, a point aimed at, a telos. And on this, and by the way, remember, the second is going to be a parallel structure to the first. So the delight, the man who is in delight, etc. What is his delight? His delight is in the Torah of Yahweh and on his Torah. He meditates, and literally it's not meditates, it's murmurs. He murmurs. Why is he murmuring? Because people didn't read silently, they read aloud. Murmurs. All day, and literally, and I'm going to give you this last one, and that's all I can do today. It says literally Yoam and Leil. But literally Yoam is not a day, it's the period of time when it's hot, and Leil is the twist away from the light. So these words can also mean metaphorically in plenty and in adversity. So the hot times, that is the times of summer, and the times of twist away from the light, in other words, the winter time, the time of adversity. Again, looking at Hebrew literature is very different than looking at Greek literature. It's going from a very concrete to a euphemistic type way. So here's the introduction to the Psalms. We're going to go very deep into all these subjects and try to understand them at a very good level. Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you look after us through this week. In your name we pray. Amen.
Well,
Yeah.
so,